All right. Well, good afternoon, Sustainable Building Week attendees. My name is Michael Wonsidler, and I'm the program manager for the County of San Diego's recycling program. I'm going to also turn off my camera here to preserve our bandwidth. I'd also like to join you. Thank you in joining us for this webinar on soil, water, and climate connections of compost and mulch best management practices. I'm honored to introduce my fellow speakers, including Manuel Medrano, the Environmental Services Manager for the City of Chula Vista, and Dr. Craig Kologi, Business Development and Sustainability Manager for San Pasqual Valley Soils. He's also a member of the Board of Directors for the U.S. Composting Council's California statewide chapter, the Association of Compost Producers. I'd also like to recognize our host and partner, James Ryan from the American Society of Landscape Architects in his role as the chair of the San Diego chapter's Climate Action Committee. As a panel, we'll be sharing information on new requirements related to diversion of organic materials from the landfill, procurement of processed organic products, and share some case studies and tools demonstrating the benefits of using these products. Our hope is that this information will support achievement of your organization's climate goals, and for those of you that work with municipalities, help them comply with the new requirements. So with that overview, I'll begin my section of the presentation that provides background on the new rules, and then my colleagues will cover the many applications and benefits in more detail. As you may have heard, organic waste comprises more than a third of the California's waste stream. A new state law, SB 1383, requires California to reduce the amount of organic material sent to landfill 75% compared to 2014 levels. As of this January 1st, new requirements are now in effect for jurisdictions, waste generators, waste haulers, and facilities to separate and recycle organic materials. California needs 50 to 100 new processing facilities to manage all of these organic materials. But what happens to the products coming out of these facilities? Well, to be sustainable, they'll need markets and buyers. The procurement requirements of SB 1383 are designed to help build these markets for products coming out of these facilities. Among other rules, SB 1383 requires cities and counties to buy specified amounts of recovered organic waste products, like compost and mulch. The purpose of these requirements is to help grow markets for these end products. As we've seen with other recycling programs, collection can only go so far. The new law will not be successful unless there are sustainable markets for end products. This helps close the loop on recovering and using organic waste. Though the procurement requirements are for jurisdictions, as many of your organizations provide services to jurisdictions, you too can be part of the solution. So what exactly are recovered organic waste products? Well, these are products made from California landfill diverted recovered organic waste, processed at a permitted or otherwise authorized operation or facility. This is to ensure that we can verify that the organics are diverted and that all materials are made from in-state recovered organic waste. Recovered organic waste products that cities and counties can purchase to meet their procurement targets are mulch, compost, transportation fuel, electricity or heat derived from anaerobic digestion, and electricity from biomass conversion. As there are limited supplies of fuels and energy derived from organic waste in our region, it's likely that most jurisdictions will be purchasing compost and mulch to meet their annual targets. Though each city and the unincorporated county have their own individual procurement targets, to help give you an idea of the volume of material we're talking about, I'll share the overall target for the entire San Diego region. And to give you an idea how this works, the state assigns an annual procurement target for each jurisdiction based on population. The jurisdiction's population is multiplied by a per capita procurement factor, 0.08 tons per person, and the result is the jurisdiction's procurement target, measured in tons of raw feedstock. The jurisdiction then decides how much of the finished product they'll purchase, and they multiply the conversion factor for each material type by its procurement target to obtain the amount of the finished product they'll need to purchase. And the jurisdiction can meet their target by purchasing just one product or a mix of products. So they can buy 100% compost, or 50-50 compost and mulch, and many other combinations. Again, for illustrative purposes, this slide shows the total amount of products the entire San Diego region would need to purchase to meet 100% of its procurement target. So if the entire region wanted to purchase just mulch, it would be 268,000 tons. Or if just compost, as this material type reduces in size when processed, it's a lower figure, so 155,000 tons. These large volumes will require our region to work collaboratively to ensure that these regional that these annual targets are met. This slide is to show some quick examples of how a jurisdiction can use compost and mulch to meet their targets. A jurisdiction can use compost and or mulch for soil cover at parks and open spaces, as erosion control on roadways or other projects, and for giveaways. After this section, my colleagues will go into much more detail on the host of applications and benefits of using these products. To qualify as an eligible product under the state rules, there are standards for the materials purchased, including being produced at a permitted facility and meeting quality and contamination standards. We don't have time to go into these details today, but it's important to include these specifications in your purchase orders. Jurisdictions can meet their targets by either directly buying material, contracting with a direct service provider, for example, a landscape contractor that buys compost and mulch on behalf of the jurisdiction, or by using materials that they produce themselves. And though we want to prioritize and support locally produced materials as our first option, products made anywhere in California may qualify. To wrap up this background, record keeping is a critical component so that compliance can be demonstrated to the state. Jurisdictions and their service providers must maintain the following records: the name, location, and contact information for the facility where products are purchased, a general description of how the product was used, and invoices or similar records, both for the direct purchase or from a direct service provider. So with those administrative foundations out of the way, I'll now turn it over to Manuel Medrano to discuss the opportunity and benefits of expanding our use of compost and mulch in the region.
Thank you, Mike. So this begins the second half of our presentation, where I and Dr. Kaloja will share information on how to use compost and mulch and the connections to our soil, water, and climate. Next, please. So first, to provide a local context. In San Diego County, 1.5 million tons of compostable materials are landfilled annually. With SB 1383, this material will need to be diverted from landfill. We estimate that up to 3 to 4 million cubic yards of mulch and compost products will be produced each year. So a quick note on the terminology, mulch, and it was previously explained briefly, but it refers to ground cover. It's woody material, such as branches and chip lumber used as ground cover, as shown in the lower right image. For jurisdictions that choose to purchase mulch to meet the state's procurement target, it must be purchased. I would say we must purchase it because I'm a representative of a jurisdiction from a permitted facility. And the jurisdiction must provide a copy of an ordinance or any other enforceable mechanism to the state. It was actually required this month, the first of this month, to make sure that it meets the various requirements and product standards. So these materials could be that are producing your parks and roads and other departments that are chipped and grind on site and used on site will not qualify. They have to be purchased, procured from a facility that is permitted, and then plus you'll have to have some type of an enforceable mechanism to make sure it meets certain quality. And then compost refers to product processed from decomposed materials such as food scraps and landscape trimmings that are shown in the top right image. And different types of compost can be used on a soil amendment as ground cover and for different types of crops and different types of land application. And then to the extent that we're able to prevent food waste and landscape waste at the source and implement food recovery programs, we could reduce the volume also that is produced and then processed. Next slide, please. So a significant opportunity exists in greater use of compost and mulch and erosion control and landscaping. So current sales in the region are estimated at 621,000 Oh, sorry. So current sales are estimated at 621,000 cubic yards per year. With growing awareness of the benefits of compost and mulch, as well as the new state procurement requirements, this amount has the potential to increase to 1.5 million cubic yards per year. So if you think about the other state agencies that are also required to procure this material, like the CSU and UC system, Caltrans, and others, that potential could grow as well. And then just briefly, the other 1.2 million cubic yards could increase soil health and capture carbon in farms and ranches, as well as in the residential, retail, and ornamental plant sectors. Next slide, please. So I believe this is where we turn it over to Dr. Kaloji, if I'm correct, Michael.
That's right. We'll turn it over to Dr. Kaloji now, and he'll review some of the best management practices in more details. Dr. Kaloji, if you're speaking, your mic may be on mute.
It is.
Thank you. It was, for some reason, it went on mute. Thank you. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, thank you both for the introduction. And Nature's Toolbox, compost and mulch utilization. It's one thing to collect, process, and procure compost, and it's totally another thing to utilize it. So the science of compost utilization is something I've been working with for well over 10 years. I was part of Filtrix International as a technical consultant for over 10 years, who pioneered the use of compost for stormwater management, erosion control, and green infrastructure. So what we're going to be doing here through my presentation is showing you some examples of how compost can be utilized and why that's so important to the success of Senate Bill 1383. If we don't know how to don't know where we're going to divert it or how we're going to use it, then we really have a block in the circular economy, if you will, of making this all work. So let's go to the next slide, please. So there are many different compost applications, and there are many different types of compost. Compost is not a single product. Much of it revolves around particle size, and we'll be talking about that. But we start obviously with local recycled materials, and then the creation of a certified media, one where we are transparent with what that particular compost material contains, both nutritionally, particle size, pathogen-wise. Everything needs to be tested through a certified laboratory, and that's really critical. Again, not all compost is created equal, and therefore you need to know what you're using. That's going to be a critical component of the success of this program. And then there are ways to contain and move compost so that it can do things for us and accomplish tasks and different applications to provide ecosystem services. And many of them have to do with the filtration ability of compost, specifically when used as a mulch or coarser material, as well as the ability to restore habitat and to augment soil health. Next slide. So here are the two tools. When we typically think of stormwater management, we think of the coarse material, which most people would call a mulch, but this is a composted mulch. You can use a regular non-composted, non-processed, raw chipped organic material as a filter media as well, simply because most sediment is removed through the physical filtration of that sediment. And then we have the growing media, and this is the one where people get a bit confused because we always think of the finer half-inch minus material, compost material, as a soil amendment. But in fact, growing media, as you'll see, is also utilized very extensively for the creation of compost erosion control blankets, where we want to stop erosion and support the vegetative establishment of the bare soil. Next slide. So we're going to show you some examples now of what I'm talking about. All these pictures you see in here on the compost erosion control blanket utilized the material that we typically refer to as a growing media, not the mulch. And the reason why is because of its ability to get into every nook and cranny and stabilize the movement of the soil's detachment from the surface, and the ability to encourage and support vegetative growth, which by far is the most effective erosion control technology we have, Mother Nature. Next slide. So notice in that inset slide there where we show the grass growing, notice how that fine compost is able to get into all these nooks and crannies and allow that root system of the vegetation to lock in that soil, which then gives us that 100% contact and that excellent erosion control and prevention of detachment from the soil surface. Next slide. And by the way, the pictures you see there are blower trucks. That is a very common way of applying a fine and coarse compost to the surface, very efficient. We're going to be depending tremendously on this last mile of application of using blower trucks as well as palletized products that I'll show you shortly to move this material to where it's going to be able to be applied. Next slide. So Nature's Toolbox has been, compost has been utilized by Caltrans very extensively. These are some pictures of the Prunedale project up in Monterey, San Benito, and Santa Clara County. And this was a very large project. For 2 years, they evaluated the effectiveness of compost in its various forms, both coarse material and fine material, to stabilize a highly erodible soil that they were dealing with in this region of the state. Next slide. And they compared it to conventional best management practices. In this case, on the bottom of the slide, you're seeing an application of bonded fiber matrix, hydromulch, and straw wattles applied to a slope just above on the same slope. These are not two different photographs. This is the same slope. There was a compost erosion control blanket along with some berms with seed, and they added seed to it to stabilize it even more. This photograph was taken after a 5-inch rain event, and the only thing that was actually effective under these extreme weather conditions were the compost blanket berms relative to the bonded fiber matrix of the conventional BMPs. In short, it is a superior best management practice, not an equal to where it's applied. And Caltrans learned some extremely valuable lessons in the process of this 2-year evaluation. I do have slide presentation from Caltrans. If anyone would like to see that, I'd be more than glad to send it to you. Next slide. Here's an example of the thickness typically when we talk about a compost erosion control blanket. What they're referring to here is with the acronym CECB. And that thickness typically, depending on the slope, here you have a 4-to-1 and going as steep as a 2-to-1. You'll notice that we don't typically go more than 2 inches in depth. And the reason why is because if you get it too thick, the compost is like a sponge, and the more it absorbs, the heavier it gets, and it will start to slough off the slope. So these are the ideal depths of compost, 1/2 inch minus compost, the fine growing media compost, and what you need to have effective erosion control under these rain conditions of 1 inch, 2 inches, and 4 inches. And you can see it changes. So there's a bit of science here and engineering that's required to properly and effectively apply these tools. Next slide. Here is what we're trying to mimic with a compost erosion control blanket. This is nature's way of filtering and stabilizing the surface of soils through the natural progression of organic matter dropping onto that surface, decomposing, and then acting as a filter and also as a soil food web, if you will, to encourage the development of a healthy soil profile. So let that inset, that circle there, you see all the other organisms that benefit from this application. So in addition to the physical filtering, we also have a lot of biological and chemical activity going on when we use compost as a tool. Next slide. And the benefits of them are startling when you really look at it. And we've done numerous tests all over the United States, and without exception, compost blanket soils typically outperform all the others combined in its ability to filter, stabilize, and remove contaminants. It's Mother Nature way. All we're doing is mimicking nature with the use of our compost material. Next slide. And when we add vegetation to the equation, which here, these are some Caltrans applications, we have even more effectiveness. It's not just the compost itself, it's all of that biology and that plant root system that is really, really enhancing the ability of these environments to stabilize and improve and protect the quality of the water flowing through these areas. Next slide. So these are the trends that Caltrans has reported, and this is going way back to 2013. It's even higher now. So they continue to increase their usage. However, keep in mind, Caltrans, even if all of their applications were using compost, would probably represent only 7% of the amount of compost we need to divert and utilize. So it's still a relatively small percentage of what we're going to have to do and the challenge we have ahead of us and how we're going to utilize this material statewide. Next slide. So this is Caltrans' summary. The compost retains a large volume of water. In fact, a 12-inch, 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot cubic foot of the fine material will hold approximately 4 gallons of water. It really acts as a sponge, not only holding that water, but allowing to infiltrate and capture that water and keep it from running off into our oceans and receiving bodies. So it really, really replenishes that aquifer. It prevents this erosion control we talked about. Reduces that. When you reduce that runoff volume, you also prevent the erosion control and enhance the infiltration of our valuable stormwater. And it promotes that vegetative establishment. It improves the downstream water quality by both retaining and absorbing all these pollutants that are coming off our hard gray infrastructure, the roadways, the concrete, all of that. This is the biofilter that takes care of the heavy metals, the nitrogen, phosphorus, oils, greases, and what have you. Next slide. So restoration applications using compost socks. We're going to get into taking this same material, and in this case, we're using the fine material again. The coarse material we typically use as a filter for removing sediment, but the fine material, not only as we've seen it, is excellent as a compost erosion control blanket. We can build things with it by putting it in socks, adding seed to it, and learning how to utilize this to create green infrastructure where needed. Next slide. We're going to go through some slides quickly here to show you. So we start with a mesh, 1/8 to 3/8 inch opening, and it's usually polypropylene. There are available biodegradable socks, but typically a biodegradable sock will lose its tensile strength. And in these applications, we typically want the strength of the polypropylene, and we want to vegetate it to prevent photodegradation, because the vegetation stops the UV radiation from degrading this and then stabilize it. It's soft armoring the slopes and the landscape that we're working with. Next slide. Comes in different colors, different sizes, what have you. So normally in this case, we're either going to blow the growing media in with the seed, or we're going to apply it to small sections and palletize it. Both ways work. Both ways are used extensively throughout the United States. Next slide. Here's an example of sock that's been blown in, and then it's wrapped with a geogrid, and you'll notice it's right on the edges of a bank. And people always say, well, isn't compost going to contaminate that water? Not if it's certified and it's high quality. It's actually in a form of organic form of nitrogen that is very stable and does not tend to move. It's not as soluble as our synthetic fertilizers. Therefore, that stream, actually, the quality of the water in that stream is enhanced by the use of compost on these slopes, on these banks, rather than degraded. So here you see it. Not only did they apply and stabilize the socks, and we're going to show you how they do that shortly, they also applied a blanket of the fine compost with seed on top of the socks, using both a compost blanket and the socks to stabilize this bank. Next slide. And so this is what it looks like. You can even use live stakes and jam them into this sock and vegetate, in this case, willows into these sloped areas to stabilize that soil. Or you can use a customized seed mix, ideally a perennial seed that's native to the area that you're working in. Next slide. And these are some of the designs that are available both on the Filtrex website, or you can get them through Forrester Press. They have a sustainable site design manual that covers all of these applications and the specifications and the CAD drawings in detail. If you're interested in getting access to that, just contact me afterwards. I'll be glad to send you the information on how to get access to all these different designs. Next slide. So here's an example of the palletized material with vegetation, with a geogrid, and typically they'll apply it just to the base where the shear stress from the moving water is going to be coming in contact with the slope face, with the bank, stream bank. Next slide. And here it is, vegetated, and you can see that vegetation now is locked into place. It's grown through that mesh, anchoring it, protecting it from further photo degradation, and stabilizing that and soft armoring it rather than, let's say, using a concrete culvert to do the same thing. So now we get all the environmental benefits of a natural system, heat island reduction, even sound. Green infrastructure has so many advantages in addition to stormwater management, not to mention the carbon sequestration that's going on in this particular application. Next slide. Here's some more examples. A stream on the left that after they finished installing the socks, and then on the right after the rains had come and vegetated it. Extremely effective tools. Next slide. Here's another example. Here they plug the socks. Rather than add seed to it and have it vegetate, they just cut a little hole in there and pop in a little seedling and allow those riparian plants, transplants to colonize and vegetate that stream bank. Next slide. Here's an example. The next series of slides are a project I was involved with up in Gilroy, California when I was with Filtrex. This was a private owner's hillside alongside a stream that was very sensitive to the steelhead population, I believe, of fish in that stream. And the Fish and Game said, you got to get this cleaned up. And next slide, we'll show you how they did it. So this is what it looked like before. They laid wood over the stream bank to protect that water course while they then focused on that slope. And you can see it's an extreme slope, very, very steep, completely degrading and contaminating and damaging that stream habitat. Next slide. After they covered that, they brought equipment in and they graded that slope to where they could work with it so that it was smooth and they could lay the sock and the compost onto that soil surface. Next slide. So here they are getting the palletized sock with the seed in it. And in this case, they added seed and they also used transplants in combination. So, and they laid geogrid on the surface, and then they're going to wrap these sections, these 3 to 4 foot sections of sock onto the slope. Next slide. So here the men are anchoring it in with the gripple anchors. They drove these anchors in to take the geogrid material and lock in the socks so that the socks would not move. And you can see the inset, and this is after irrigating, and they added irrigation in this case to irrigate the vegetation up, and that's what it looked like. Next slide. And this is at 6 months later. So this is just an example of how you can stabilize a stream slope conditions that are eroding using compost. Now let's just take an example of how much material was used on this. On a typical slope, Filtrex did an analysis, and for the sake of discussion, if this is 1,500 facial square feet of wall, okay, of slope, that would require about 2,000 linear feet of 12-inch grow socks, which is what they used on this. That would divert the equivalent of 320,000 pounds of organics from landfills, or 160 tons, just this one project. It would absorb 8,000 gallons of water, potential rainfall from running off the slope, taking with it soil and being lost in the stream and infiltrating it into the groundwater of this land. 560,000 pounds of CO2 equivalent methane are avoided due to this amount of organics. 75 pounds of it is sequestered in the vegetation, another 54,000 pounds in that actual soil. So the offsets, just to put it in context, on this project would be equivalent of a greenhouse gas emissions of 50 passenger vehicles being taken off the road for the entire year. So that's just gives you an example of the potential when you start to take the science of compost utilization and starting to apply it with some of the tools we have. Next slide. So here are just some examples of restoration remediation, kind of summarizing what I've just covered. Next slide. And here's the Sustainable Site Design Manual I mentioned that's available through Forester Press, or Filtrex actually publishes the same content, but it has the Filtrex brand on it on their website, filtrex.com, under their design manual, and they provide all of the designs at no cost online. Next slide. It has 24 different best management practices, and that's my portion. There's my contact information. That's a lot to throw at you, but it gives you some idea of the potential of this amazing material we call compost.
Thank you, Dr. Kaloji. So can we move to the next slide, please, Michael? So as discussed, there are many benefits. Sorry, I hear an echo. I wonder what's going on. Can you guys hear that echo as well?
I think it's gone now.
Okay, excellent. So there are many benefits of using compost and mulch, including to help us jurisdictions and other cities, counties, and other state agencies comply with the state procurement requirement that I mentioned or that we mentioned earlier. It helps us also adapt to a changing climate and meet our climate goals. As each of their municipal programs that purchase landscape and erosion control products can be a part of this solution. So to give us some ideas for how these products can apply, could be applied in your projects, we're going to share some examples of compost-related best management practices, or BMPs, similar to what Dr. Kaloji shared, but these are also at other stages here. In this photo, you'll see an example of a compost BMP used at a roadside in our city, in my city of Chula Vista, right off the 805 freeway there. You'll see compost supported the plant development and allowed native species to flourish while weeds were crowded out. Runoff water is slowed and absorbed into the soil rather than just running off. And compost also removes and decomposes nitrogen, phosphorus, oil, greases, fuels, herbicides, pesticides that are often in the water. Next slide, please. So here's an example of a 100-acre development in Carmel Valley. As you can see on the screen, there's 50 total acres, which were graded slopes that required stabilization and erosion protection. The surrounding area was highly environmentally sensitive, so compost socks were applied on the slopes and to further protect by hydroseed. Using an erosion control cost comparison tools from the EPA, the use of this compost BMP reduced maintenance, repair, and disposal costs by 75% compared to conventional BMPs, which resulted in net savings of $130,000. So other advantages for policy leaders to consider and program managers to consider is the societal cost and the environmental cost of using compost or mulch. And the carbon benefits for this project reduced nearly 900 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents and yielded an estimated value of $190,000 in environmental and societal benefits. So just briefly, a compost consisting of large particle size was used here. Actually, we need to go back to keep on this. So it was large particle size used, which acts as a filter and allows stormwater to flow and pass while reducing erosion and sediment losses. And the use of compost means that organic materials were avoided from entering the landfill, basically recycled into a beneficial product that involves soil health and also uses less fertilizers and pesticides that don't need to be manufactured and transported. So these through through compost BMPs can be more expensive up front. They do provide a greater savings and benefits over the project life. And the environmental societal benefits of carbon are roughly around 139,000 per cubic yard versus a cubic yard of compost. Next, please. All right, and here's another example. This is from the Civita development in Mission Valley. which similar to many steep slopes, was cut for transportation that are cut for transportation projects. The image shows that the contractor was covering 7 acres of severe steep slopes with compost blankets seeded with native plants. Several years later, you could see that the dense vegetation on the right side now covers these walls. So for this project, choosing a different VMP really was not an option, as other methods had failed during preliminary trials. So the compost acted both as a soil amendment and also as a growing medium to protect the water and that were at least, and also and additional projected water savings added 10 acre per feet. So this is not only did it also work as a soil amendment, but also created quite a great deal of water savings here. And again, we looked at the environmental benefits and societal benefits of using compost, and carbon benefits for this project reduced more than 600 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents and yielded an estimated value of $130,000 in benefits. Starting again, well, it started as of this January. Us jurisdictions and other state agencies need to receive credit for these procurement targets per, something we already mentioned. So next slide, please. So with all the benefits discussed, we now see a greater use. Why don't we see a greater use for compost and mulch in our region? So one of the reasons is status quo. It is easy to keep doing what we've always been doing. And also as initial cost of purchasing and installing compost BMPs, which could be greater than what's currently being used. But the maintenance, repairs, and disposal costs of using compost BMPs are significantly less than alternatives that are more likely to fail after a certain time. Some of the current uses include silt fences and straw wattles, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. They come at a lower cost, but are we really considering all of the cost, like the environmental and societal costs that I mentioned earlier? And additional to this is the long-term environmental benefits that are often not considered, such as improved soil health, water savings, and carbon sequestration. So to provide a more accurate comparison and evaluation in the decision making in projects, there's the tools you'll see here on the slide that include the US EPA's Greenscapes, the warm calculator also from the EPA. The California Air Resources Board has a calculator, and the USDA Comet Planner also could help you quantify those environmental and cost benefits. And I would say they're easier. Some of them are more user friendly than others, but they do provide a great benefit of using to compare the cost of projects. And also, just locally, we're also working with national experts to provide a simple tool that could consolidate these benefits in an easy way that we could use in our region, and should be posted really, really soon. We'll share with the group as soon as it's available. Next slide, please. So our next steps here to take or call of action, first is we need to evaluate life cycle costs and benefits of projects. So we could compare them and evaluate them holistically using those tools that I mentioned in the previous slide. That's always important to include in the project valuations. Second, with this SB 1383 requirements that I mentioned, it is now imperative that we encourage project managers to review all existing product specs and determine if they're up to date, and make sure that new BMPs also include the use of compost and the use of mulch that is especially produced in the area. And then we also need to support local facilities and our local economy. So it's a market development aspect here that we need to make sure we put together, because we're going to be in the future producing quite a bit of this material. So it needs to find a home, it needs to find a market for it. Third, share information with staff, with your contractors, subcontractors, anybody you can. This is a perfect venue to expand knowledge of the benefits of the application of compost and mulch. So there are a lot of educational resources out there. We have staff from local jurisdictions that could assist, like Michael, myself, Dr. Kaloji, and then there's also links to the Caltrans. They have training videos. The agency Cal Recycle, which is the ones that are enforcing on jurisdictions to make sure this compliance happens, that this procurement compliance happens. They have in their website, they have great information on the use of this material as well. which includes product specifications, application information, and case studies, which are always important. And lastly, we have to make sure that jurisdictions are on track to meet this requirement. We ask for your help on this. So you have to work with, we ask you to work with the local municipalities and project managers to develop an inventory of what currently is being used and purchased, and see if it meets some of those how figure out what is that delta to meet that procurement requirement based on some of the calculators out there, including CalRecycle, again, that has a great calculator on their website that will help you with to start planning for this. Next slide. So thank you very much. This is where we ask for questions, and I believe there's another slide with our contact information, which is the next one, Michael.
Yes, that's right. I'll put it on that slide too for our conclusion, but
thank you. So are you doing the rest of the slides, or?
Yeah, I think those are the conclusion of our slides. I think James Ryan, our partner here, may want to add some information about his projects. Would you like to take a couple minutes to talk about what you're doing, James?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Michael. Manuel, and Dr. Kaloji, thank you so much for your time. It was a great presentation. Appreciated seeing all the BMPs and the various projects you got to employ them on. So again, thank you for your time. But I would also like to bring attention to the ASLA Climate Action Committee, specifically the San Diego chapter that I am starting up. And we'd really like to celebrate a lot of these amazing things that have to do with the climate responsibility, and especially this climate and mulch BMPs work. I think this has tremendous opportunities here, and this committee that I'm chairing really seeks to celebrate more of these things. And we're seeking people in landscape architecture and allied professions to join and to help advance climate positive design in San Diego. So thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, James, and thank you to all the other presenters. We're happy to take any questions or comments or thoughts from any of the participants today. So it's open. You can either raise your hand or you can just jump right in. So the floor is open.
Hello, good afternoon. This is Patricia Furman. Thank you very much for this great presentation, very informative. I agree with you. I think it all starts with education. And my question to you is, have you shared this information with other disciplines like engineering? Often I see plans with the same specifications, and I believe that, like you said, Manuel, it's so easy just to continue specifying the same products, but the more they understand the benefits of this compost and mulch, the more that they may be able to start specifying different products. So the question is, have you contacted or shared this information with other disciplines, for example, engineering?
Thank you for the question, Patricia. I think you're hitting on a very important consideration, which is not just preaching to the choir, getting it out to all of the larger community. And I can speak first for myself and my work with the County of San Diego, and I'll turn it over to our other presenters too to chime in and give their responses. But internally, I think many jurisdictions have formed an internal SB 1383 working group to discuss these new procurement targets and to also discuss how we can meet the new standards and hit these targets. And so we're sharing it broadly with many departments that would be purchasing materials like these, but we are in the process of working with them to develop new specs and ensure that the materials that are purchased will be eligible towards these new standards. So I think more work needs to be done, but I agree with you that we need to get out to those other communities too. And so also we'll turn that question back to you. If you have suggestions on particular communities or groups that you'd suggest within the engineering or other fields, and this could go not just for yourself, but any of the other folks that are here today. Happy to have a brainstorming session of folks that you think that would be valuable to hear this message. Dr. Craig, James, Manuel, anything you'd like to chime in on that?
I'd like to add, in Chula Vista, we're actually deployed a study, or we're actually that continues, where we're evaluating the uses in city properties and city facilities like parks and open spaces to see what the use of compost could equate to. How far will we need to meet this requirement for Chula Vista? So yes, to answer your question, Patricia, we are sharing this information. We have been sharing it informally in separate meetings, also with the different departments, but also we're going to have additional information to provide to show that where these uses could happen and to what extent and to what frequency throughout the year. So it's work that continues, as Michael says, and yes, we're open to information. We're open to suggestions on how to best reach those other disciplines.
Yeah, this is Dr. Kalaji here, and I agree with everything both Michael and Manuel said, and would like to add that we are on the verge of a organics revolution in California, the likes of which I don't think most people can truly comprehend or appreciate. We're the first state in the United States to really take the recycling of organics and its utilization to this level. And as such, the science of compost utilization is in its infancy, and it's going to take filtering down some of the practical applications. We need to invest as a state and in local communities in training practitioners of recycled organics to deliver some of these economic and environmental benefits that we're talking about. This is a natural capital that's been ignored and actually buried, producing methane that's 80 times more potent in holding heat on the planet. And now we're flipping the tables and saying this is not only a waste product, but it's an absolutely essential resource that we have not only underutilized, misused, and now we have to teach a whole community, if you will, of professionals how to use it and how to use it responsibly, quality control, contamination issues. It's a very much more complex than what you first think about, because this particular form of carbon comes in many shapes and sizes, and you really need to take it as a high priority to understand the science behind its utilization. It requires not only engineering, it requires biology, because you're also impacting the soil biology tremendously when you add carbon to the soil. And how do you manage that biology to benefit both water quality and air quality, and then just the chemistry alone. A lot of people don't understand that inorganic chemistry of soils creates the infrastructure upon which the biology lives. So you have to factor in all of these three major disciplines, engineering, biology, and chemistry, to really best utilize this material. This is not for the faint of heart, and it's going to take everyone's effort, but mainly a recognition that ultimately it's going to be the practitioners, the feet on the streets, that last mile where once we've collected, processed, and produced a quality compost, what next? How do we get it into the hands of the people that can utilize it to solve these environmental problems responsibly? And all the logistics involved, the equipment, the blower trucks, all of that has yet to be worked out and taken to the next level, which is where we're at. We're at the beginning of this process. It's going to take all of us, as they say, it's going to take a village of professionals all pulling together, and the landscape architect community is going to be absolutely essential to the success of Senate Bill 1383. They have to get behind it, or we are setting up jurisdictions to fail if we don't give them the knowledge and education on how to utilize this material.
And I think I'd add on to that really quickly, just for a moment. I see others want to chime in too, but the recognition of the carbon sequestration potential for these materials are phenomenal. There's terrific connections to our climate action plans and our achievement toward those goals. And it's being recognized, not just in California. Washington State has just adopted very similar standards to what California has done because of the recognition of this close connection. So there's a lot of benefits to be had, but we have to apply the materials in order to gain those. So, did I see a hand up from Tracy? Tracy, feel free to jump in.
When you think about the expense that you all are going through, is there a way that you might be able to monetize this? And in other words, I've been out to the Miramar landfill, and there are tons and tons of compost and all the the shredding of all the limbs and leaves. But you can only take as much as you can. How about getting this into the hands of some of the nursery groups out there, because they're the ones who'd be the end users, at least in a where the public comes and they're able to see that hey, this material has helped be able to keep their water costs down, all the benefits that go along with it. So just a thought.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I'll let Dr. Craig talk about that, because he's
Yeah.
very closely connected with the ag community and nursery community.
Yes, thank you, Michael. Yeah, Tracy, you're correct. There's tremendous potential, but there's a huge barrier for the adoption of the agricultural industry, whether it's the nurseries, the avocado orchards and citrus orchards that could take massive amounts of this material to the benefit of the planet, to the benefit of their soils. But they operate on such a small profit margin, many of them not even being able to survive, that they need help. And they need a lot of help in order to, I honestly believe most of them would take it if we made it easy and we didn't expect them to pay for it. I think that's what really gets to the growers, is when one tells them all about the benefits as if somehow they have this extra cash of money to pay for the transportation to their farm, as well as the application equipment to apply it and manage it. And that's that last mile that's going to be the biggest hurdle that we have to solve as a society, is how we get this valuable resource into the hands of the people that would like to use it, but that truthfully can't financially support it.
Thanks.
All right, other questions from anyone in the group?
I do have another question. Following up on what Tracy was saying, I think that it's important also to bring people to the landfill and show them how this process works. I think that some people better understand it when they see it. So I know that you are willing to offer some tours or site visits for people, and how would that be? How could we organize that?
I love the idea. I think for especially very important folks like those from the landscape architect community, I think a tour and some demonstrations would be a wonderful idea. I don't want to speak for anyone here, but there's some operators that may be willing to share information or host a tour. So I think that could be a good follow-up to this meeting today. So we will continue to be in touch with the ASLA San Diego chapter to see if we can organize one in the near future.
That would be great. Thank you.
And I gotta say, the idea does come from Chula Vista. We'll have to take some credit. We've given some tours to some of the folks, some of our landscape architects, but and more tours will continue to other staff too. So yeah, I encourage all jurisdictions to have tours to see this material, to touch this material, even to bring in equipment that, in the case and that we used in Chula Vista, that are actually using to spread this material to see how it works with the finished product being created at that particular landfill or operation. So yeah, that's really important to make sure it happens.
I just wanted to make one comment. We launched this program today on the kind of the coattails of the San Diego Green Building Council. They were helping us promote the program, and it's a light turnout, but we wanted to thank the San Diego Green Building Council for inviting us to make this part of their Sustainable Building Week.
Our pleasure, Tracy. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah.
What I would like to do is challenge all the landscape designers and architects. It would be great if we had almost a prize or an incentive to come up with ways to utilize recycled organics creatively to solve problems locally. And if there was some sort of contest even, I think it would be kind of fun, but it would also move people to start thinking outside the box about how we can take this valuable resource and start to really apply it to solve environmental problems in our environment, in our local communities. I just throw that out there as something that I would love to see.
That's great. I think it's a wonderful idea, Dr. Kalaji, and maybe we could work on this after this presentation today and try to work something out.
Okay, yeah, I would love to, James. Yeah, we'll stay in touch. And by the way, my email is up there. Any resources you saw today that you would like, for example, the Caltrans 2-year study. I have their PowerPoint presentation on how they utilized compost to solve a real erosive soil problem they were encountering up in Northern California. I also have slide presentations on that bank stabilization project in Gilroy, a whole slide presentation on that. So please don't hesitate to contact me, and I will be more than glad to share any of that with you. The more information I can get out there in the hands of people like yourselves, the better off we'll all be.
Yes, and I'll just chime in to say that we have, this group has presented to the Regional Planning Committee of Sandag last summer. And so we have their staff report and other documents that be happy to provide to anybody that would like more information. That includes that perspective from Sandag and more detail. So please feel free to reach out to any of us.
Well, if any of you are familiar with the Earth Fair that's coming up on April 24th, our chapter has a booth at the Earth Fair. And if any of you would like to provide any information for us to distribute to the public, to the thousands of people who apparently attend the Earth Fair, just let me know.
Perfect. Thank you. We'll follow
Right,
up.
thank you.
Earth Fair.
And James, I gotta hop off, and Tracy gotta hop off, but you guys have recorded this. Is there any way you can send me the link or send me the file so we can put it up on our website so people can see it after the fact, kind of on their own?
Sure, we will do that. I will stop recording now.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Yeah.
I'm going to thank everybody for their attendance today and appreciate everybody's time and interest in the subject.
Yep.
Thank you
Thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Take
Have
care.
a nice day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.